Hello, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. I wanted to be sure you could hear me. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Abimbola Devakin, and I will be the moderator for this session. Welcome to the webinar, the Corporate Governance webinar organized by Advantage of Africa. Please, like you to use your complete full names as your name here so that we can get it down and prepare your certificates that will be given, the certificate of recognition that will be given at the end of the session. So we'd like to have your full name so that we can prepare your certificate and send to you alongside other documents to be sending at the end of the session. Thank you. So yeah, good afternoon again and welcome to the webinar, Corporate Governance webinar organized by Advantage of Africa for the healthcare sector. So this free webinar is powered by Advantage of Africa, a health solutions company that provides collaboration and aggregation platforms for access to quality and affordable medicines and also drive growth for the healthcare sector here in Nigeria, and so consequently would move to all of Africa. Please, before we proceed, I would like to say that as you come in, please mute yourself so that we don't have issues of people speaking up when the sessions are going on. Please mute yourself and you can put on your video so we'll see you, and let's have a great session. Some ground rules before we start. There will be 3 speakers as we already know, but we'll have 2 question and answer sessions. So the first question and answer session will be after Abimbola and Sally's session, and then which is about after like 1:30. Then towards the end, after Rob Newsom speaks, we'll also have another question and answer session. Please note that all your questions will be taken. Put them in the chat box or note them down when the question and answer session. When it's time for the question and answers, we would take them from the chat box for easy reconciliation. Thank you. Okay. So we'll just go ahead to the first session for today so that we don't stay more than the time we have agreed to spend here. Please let me get a response if you can hear me, either in the chat box or just unmute yourself so that I can.
We can hear you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, so our first speaker for this session is Abimballah Devakin. Abimballah Devakin is the Chief Executive Officer of Advantage Health Africa, a health technology aggregator in the pharmacy space. She's a trained pharmacist from the University of Lagos, and she holds a master's in business administration as well. She's a certified performance technologist of the International Society for Performance Improvement, ISPI. She's keen on entrepreneurship development and has maximized this within the umbrella of the Pan-African Tony Elumelu Foundation as the Chief Operating Officer and also in building Advantage Health Africa. Abimbola is proficient in performance improvement, institutionalization and strategy development, program and project management, culture and change management, operations management, business development and capacity building. And so she's our first speaker for today. Thank you, Abimbola. I hope you can hear me.
Thank you very much, Oyinda. Good afternoon, everyone who's joined very early. We put up a case study here for you to just read. We will not be going forward with a lot of discussions, but just so you know the reality of what we're talking about, that many times as organizations want to grow, they want to improve, or they want to enter into new areas, what has happened is that they become, they begin to face challenges of governance and organizational. So the host will mute everyone, but I'll keep trying to unmute myself so that I'm not distracted. So I have a background in corporate governance, having done about 8 years in. I got some training and certification by IFC to train and enhance capacity of board directors in the financial services sector. Since then, we've done a lot of work with banks, insurance companies, and so on, and I facilitate at IOD. I just thought that it was important to bring some of that knowledge and experience here into pharmacy or into healthcare, because really we are one big broad sector, and therefore we're talking today about the fundamentals of good corporate governance. Oyinda, please let me know when I have just 3 minutes left. I'm going to start by just talking about some of the things that have shaped my mind and continue to shape my mind regarding corporate governance in healthcare. One of the things we know is that finance has been coming into Africa, but it appears that the finance that comes into other sectors is much more than that which comes into Africa, into healthcare. First, there's very little coming to Africa, but it's growing. And then when it does come into Africa, it's not largely coming into healthcare. That was the experience as reported by Tech Cabal in a report that they, you know, published in 2018. And it got me thinking, why? What's the problem or what are the challenges? There are many challenges. First of all, the depth of and the patience that you need when you invest in healthcare is much more than if you were to invest, let's say, 200 million right away into telecoms or into fintech. Yeah, that's fine. But even when you do come into healthcare, what is happening? Do we have the kind of teams that investors are looking for? Do we have the kind of structures, the viability that they're looking for? Do they think that they will get good returns on their investment? Right now, it's beginning to change. The landscape is beginning to change. We got investments late 2019. We're seeing those who are even bold. We see flying doctors saying they want to raise $1 billion to invest in African healthcare. We see Ghana's M-Pharma is spreading across Africa. We see InterSwitch investing in eClats. So it's beginning to change. 54Gene raised $15 million recently. We're seeing Helium Health. So healthcare is becoming more attractive. But if you want to play in that field and play large, you must recognize the challenges of healthcare because we have a number of problems. And we need that investment to come and address several of these problems. But see, there are some that we need to take care of first before we can and we'll be able to attract investment. One of them is poor leadership and governance structures. Many times, if you look at organizations in our sector, we're running many of them as mom and pop shops. Not that there's anything wrong with a mom and pop shop. In fact, it's a nice, quiet, practice that you can stick with, and it does some things for you. But if you are seeking growth, if you're seeking to tackle bigger problems, if you're seeking to look at the gaps that exist in Africa and in Nigeria, in our healthcare system, and how you can play a big role, what begins to happen is that you begin to look for more affordable financing. You begin to look to those who have excess finance in their hands and want to invest in somewhere. So if you are not prepared by us practicing in our sector, we need to know that that finance will not come. The support that comes with the finance will elude us, and we will not have the growth that Africa needs for healthcare to flourish and to address the needs of 1.2 billion people. We have counterfeit medicines, huge counterfeit medicine showing up in our supply chain. We have a chronic drug stockout syndrome. We have very low service coverage areas. There's some places that are not covered at all, and we're not innovating to cover them. If we do, we're doing it in bits and pieces. We have limited information that gives people the visibility that they need, and so many other things that are challenges that we face in the health sector. We therefore need deliberate investment, not just in money, but in expertise and skills that have caused other sectors to thrive and have caused other countries to thrive. I listened to somebody speak yesterday on some Zoom meeting, webinar, and he talked about he's he's an investor and he resides in South Africa. And we had talked about all the aspects of the value chain that need investment. And he said, look, there are so many things competing for the same money that we want to compete for. So they must see that investing in healthcare is worth their while. That's why we're talking about corporate governance today, the fundamentals of good corporate governance. But I'll start by defining what it is. Good corporate governance or corporate governance is not one thing, it's a number of things. The first one that strikes me is that it is a system. Corporate governance is the system by which companies are directed and controlled. So it's a system. It's not just a rule book. It's not just a process. It's not a nice to have. It's not a notion. It's not a brand. It's a system. And therefore, you put in place a good corporate governance system. This is as defined by Sir Adrian Cadbury. And I refer to him a lot because in the early 90s, when discussions started around corporate governance, he was then chairman of a certain particular company. And he was made the head of a committee in the UK to look into setting up corporate governance guidelines. So he's an authority in that space. Today, we have Sally and we have Rob. Rob is also an authority in the space of corporate governance in Africa. So I'd really like you to listen to Sally and to Rob. Sally and I have worked together in training a number of directors of banks, and it's an interesting journey that we have walked. So when we're talking about corporate governance, I think you have the best of the best that are here today to guide us and to illuminate us, and we can work with you going further if you are keen on putting in place that system. It's also a foundation, meaning it sits as a bedrock of a certain type of reform that needs to happen. Someone called Jesu Estanlilo, let me not bite my tongue, is president of IOD in the Philippines. He said that I see corporate governance as a foundation of reform, which strengthens and modernizes an economy. So it goes beyond just an organization. Good corporate governance enhances any economy, any industry, any country. And there are four key pillars of good corporate governance. One is transparency. The second is fairness. The third is accountability, while the fourth is independence. If you're talking about corporate governance, your organization, your sector, your economy must be one that embraces accountability. Who are you accountable to in your business? That's the first question. Do you have a set of advisors, a board, a partner, a strategic influencer that you are accountable to? Or is it just your regulator? And how much breadth and bandwidth does that regulator have to even listen to you and hear from you and get reports that are needed from you in order for you to say you are accountable to him or her or to them? Good corporate governance also stands on the pillar of fairness. There are always minority and there are majorities in every business. There are those that are in it, in that sector, as users, patients. We care for patients in healthcare, and they are expecting fairness in customer service, in treatment, and in all the procedures that we carry out on them. Your investors also might be minority shareholders. There's a portion of corporate governance that focuses on fairness, especially to minority share owners. I don't want to go too deeply into the various anchors and pillars, but it's important that any system of foundation that you're putting in place in your organization or in this sector, healthcare, must hold on to these 4 pillars. Transparency is also important. It's not just enough to disclose. It's better for you to be transparent. Being transparent is being able to say to your bankers that, look, I do want to bank with you and I do need your debt finance, but I don't have the collateral. How can we work with it? You'll be surprised that there might be other channels and avenues that they would introduce to you to ensure that you still get your business running. Many of us do not have the culture of transparency and disclosure. Therefore, we have missed many opportunities for growth. Some time ago, we launched the franchise and we had a pharmacist that brought in 3 of their branches. Along the line, we found that they were getting cash or money or debt from somewhere else. We asked them a typical question: if you're in this franchise, let's know more about you. And they refused to disclose the source of their finance or even the terms of the finance. And we found that we could not work together, we could not be in the same bed, and we offloaded them, offboarded them. Transparency and growth are hand in hand. If we continue a culture of cloaked, opaque practices, you're not embracing a key pillar of corporate governance. The last is independence. The people who are in charge of your organization, who work with you, who advise you, are they independent, or they are jaded, or they are skewed, or they are biased? It's very important that you embrace these 4 key pillars of corporate governance if you want to get serious with corporate governance. From these pillars have emerged certain elements, and these elements are good board practices, appropriate control environments and processes, the strong regime of disclosure and transparency, having protection of share owners, and a strong commitment to corporate governance reforms. These are all clearly stated here. We don't have too much of time to go into the details. If we were taking a 2-hour session, it would be great so that we can go line by line and work with you. And there are opportunities for us to do subsequent meetings based on the feedback that we get from this particular one. But it's important that we know what are board practices. Board practices, you embrace good board practices, because first of all, whenever anyone wants to partner with you, collaborate with you, they want to know who are the owners or who are people in charge. It's not enough for you to register a company at CAC and say, my 2 sons, 16-year-old and 11-year-old, are directors with me. Do they come to your board to influence and support you in decision making? Certainly not. Sometimes we run even our organizational structure in a manner that does not afford good corporate governance practices. So I'm urging everyone, if you really want to grow and you want to scale, you must begin to look at even such fundamentals as your board. Your board needs to be well structured. You might start with an advisory board, that's fine. An advisory board might comprise your spouse, that's fine. But you must know that you are opening yourself up for accountability and transparency, and it's a key element of good corporate governance. So issues around transparency, around share owners' rights, around the control environment, your audits, when you do the audit, who do you get involved, compliance, and so on, and then your commitment. These are all matters around good corporate governance. I'm almost rounding up. So the principles around good corporate governance is that you ensure the basis for an effective corporate governance framework. You ensure right of owners and key ownership functions. You ensure equitable treatment of share owners. Because if anybody wants to invest in you and they cannot trust you that you will be equitable with them, they will take that money elsewhere, either to another organization or another sector or another economy altogether. You must also ensure the role of stakeholders. For example, the communities that you operate in. I learned recently that gold was discovered in Osun, and they're trying to treat them the same way that those in Ogoni land were treated when oil was found there. See, there are stakeholders to every business that we operate. There are those in the communities we operate in. How we're dealing with them, communicating with them, and aligning with them. disclosure and transparency that I talked about, and board responsibilities. There are all sorts of theories that are involved right now in good corporate governance. Agency and stewardship theories are my best because it shows clearly the separation of control, who the manager is. You might be a manager in your business and also be a share owner. You must know that you wear two different caps. To be a manager, also be the owner and also the director. Sometimes it's difficult. You might find it difficult to wear three different caps. That's why there's separation of control. And even if you do wear all the three caps, you must know when you are wearing the share owner's cap, when you're wearing the manager's cap, and when you're wearing the director's cap. But today, when you're embracing good corporate governance, what is beginning to happen is that we're opening up for more parties to join in. We're opening up for other people to embrace our vision and our purpose and to help us on this journey. Because what they do for you serve you in many ways. Sometimes they help you with your internal or your external focus. Sometimes they help you with short-term issues of conformance or long-term issues of performance. They help you with your strategic thinking. They help you with policy formulation. They help you even with managing your capital. Do I go for equity or do I go for debt? When I want to invest in a new product, I want to have a new line of products that becomes my, my own name. Well, how do I go about it? Are you the only one making those decisions, or you have a board that is advising you and supporting you? These are the kind of things you consider in your governance system, because there are always parties involved. There may be your employees, there may be a union in your organization, your customers, your suppliers, even NGOs that are working with you. Consider them now that they are part of the stakeholders in your organization and deal with them using a good system of good corporate governance. They are influencers, they're regulators, they're also professional support service providers that you can work with, and there are those that are setting standards. My question to you today on this webinar: what systems are you building around these parties in your hospital, in your pharmacy, your medical laboratory, or whatever entity you are operating, leading, or guiding that is in the health services sector? Why? Because first of all, you must know and agree that capital will flow elsewhere if a country, a sector, or an organization does not have a reputation for strong corporate governance practices. Capital will go elsewhere. Secondly, investors and strategic partners, because you may say, look, I'm not looking for investors. I don't want their wahala. See this person, see that person. Yes, fine. You may not want their wahala, but you also are looking for strategic partners at one time or the other. They are not confident of the level of disclosure, they walk away. They stay away from you, they stay clear. They just tell you, oh, we'll come back, we'll come back. Likewise, when a country or a sector or organization opts for lax accounting and reporting standards, these same strategic partners or investors will walk away. Healthcare sector, I call on you today. It's time for us to wake up. The opportunities are staring at us. We must do better than we have done so far. We will have better access to capital, long-term, low-cost capital. I envy many sectors where I hear investors are coming in and they're coming with single-digit investment for 7 years, for 10 years. I'm like, wow. We'll have a better command. We'll command a premium from these investors and strategic partners. They will call you to the table when we'll have improved oversight, monitoring, and sustainability. I hear, oh, is there, UNICEF is there. Why? Some level of monitoring and oversight that is possible there than where we are operating. We'll perform better, sustainable and bigger growth. You will have a more effective decision making. Many things will not sleep, go on a holiday, because there's better decision making, and secondly and lastly, we will be able to together facilitate the health of our continent that has billion people in here. My final slide, please. What elements of good corporate governance are you imbibing and retaining in your organization? What element, right, is a lack of transparency or poor accountability, negating good corporate governance? And lastly, what corporate governance elements will you need to add that you must begin to look at? Thank you very, very much. I'm going to hand over, and please pay attention because we bring different backgrounds and different perspectives. It will help us to do well, to embrace them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Abimbola, for the insightful presentation, even though the time is short. I hope that those of us on the call are already beginning to see and understand how this applying good corporate governance to our business can actually grow our businesses. You know, a lot of people will still keep saying, why is the healthcare sector playing catch up? I think that it's not our fault. We have been told, or we believe from school, that the skills we got in school is all we need. You know, just the medical degree, just the pharmacy degree is all you need to succeed outside. And then you come out and realize that things are happening and we don't really understand what is going on. So, I mean, Abimbola has given us an insight, and Sally is coming up in a few minutes. I just want us to listen in depth. And I mean, when we also share the slides later and share the recording, listen to it again and put this into practice so that your business can actually outlive you. And even when it does, it doesn't die or it doesn't just fizzle out because the people that are managing it cannot do the things you expect them to do. So in a few minutes, I'll be bringing up Mrs. Sally Ogo Okeomai for her to give our own presentation. So let me just introduce her while she prepares to come up. Thank you. Okay, so Sally Ogo Okeomai is Executive Director of Platinum Edge Consulting Limited. With over 20 years of experience in delivering board leadership solutions, Sally provides insights and support on leading practices to improve and optimize business performance in various public and private sector organizations. She is certified in corporate governance and board evaluation with the World Bank, International Finance, and she also holds a master's degree in computer science and engineering. Sally was previously the Director of Risk Advisory Services for PwC. I mean, we just had a very strong now, and I hope that we take this serious enough to actually listen to her for your session. Thank you. Please, if you are just coming in, please mute yourself so that different echoes from different people.
I think Sally dropped out. Back on.
Okay. Okay, so while we wait for her to come back, I think we already, and so the pillars that we've heard, we need to start thinking about, we need to imbibe forward. I mean, you realize that for a lot of thieves, wake up one day and a staff has disappeared, it's not coming back to work, and I mean, there's nothing you can place for the person to actually do things right. You are sure of the financial, you are not properly keeping books. When you do, you are finding things from banks. That's part of transparency and integrity that Abimbola mentioned. So, I mean, all of these things we are looking at to sector can actually get the attention investors. The healthcare sector in Africa needs a lot of investment, and we can see it, that they can actually trust us with their money and believe that they would also make profit. So while we wait for Sally to come back, I think we'll take one person's question just so that Abimbola can give her insights while Sally signs back on. So if you have a question, okay, so she's back. So sorry, Sally's back. We'll be taking the session.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, good afternoon, Sally.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Sorry, I was struggling with my email, so I had to log in with my colleague's account. Can you make it possible so that I'll be able to share my?
You are co-host already, so you can share your screen.
All right, thank you. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay, that's my presentation.
We can see your screen, yes, ma'am.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. She has already seen me as the topic of my presentation is, what does it take to have an internal control system, good corporate governance? When Abimbola was president, did mention in this case, corporate governance effective and good. One of them is strong internal control. So in a few minutes, I'll be talking about internal control. Look at a typical business environment has what you call the value propositions. And what are those value propositions? One is the company's vision, the mission statement, the goals and objectives, and the core values. And you know that if you have a vision, a mission on how to achieve it, the goals and objectives, and also what your corporate culture will be in terms of what you believe in and how about doing things. If you don't have strategies on how to make those happen, of course, achieve anything. So Abimbola also about various stakeholders, co-organization, which includes the governance team, that's the board of directors, the different board committees, audit committee and risk management committee. You also have the executive leadership, which includes your CEO, the executive directors. Then under that, you have the senior management, which have to do with senior managers, general managers, and the vice presidents, and sometimes chief finance officers or CFOs, okay? Then you have the operational staff, which includes the middle level managers, and also the security guards at the gate. These have some certain expectations organization. These expectations have to do with the organization as a body. In the organization include the employees. What are those expectations? One is that you, for example, a staff in an organization, you want to see that is paid well. What it means is that you want to be able to go home with fat and state-of-the-art cars and be able to go on holidays. Okay, now, so this stakeholder, look, if the organization and driven by good, that we have a well-run organization. So what does it to have good business? One is that you and I, as the employee, to demonstrate that we should be able to take decisions that are beneficial, that will bring Naira and Kobo to the organizations, that will not bring the organization into bad repute, and that will also enhance our own personal career choices. It also means that we should be able to protect the name of the organization and the brand image, and should be able to advance the growth and performance of the organization. That also means that we need to be able to conduct, whenever we are doing business, having discussions, having meetings, that means there shouldn't be any sort of intimidation from us to the customers, to our own colleagues. It also means that we should be able to have internal control processes in the organization. And lastly, we should be able to have productive and credible information. And any organization that lacks that decision very, very different set wastage. Okay, so what we need is expectations. Expectations means that we should be able that whatever actions taken in the organization needs. And that's what I mean by extent of alignment with business objectives and strategy. It also means that we as employees and also incorporate good risk culture. That means that before you take any decision, you should be able to ask yourself, beneficial to my company? What is with my actions have on the organization and also me as stakeholder? It also means that we should be able to have staff up to that employee in the organization should be able to go training that will enhance your value delivery. Not just training, undergoing this training means that the organization should be able in human resources development, recruiting the best in the industry, and also making sure that recruited are retained by offering good compensation packages. It also means that we should stakeholder employee relationship. It's stakeholders in terms of our relationship with our communities, relationship with the environment, and relationship with the potential investors. It also means that whatever actions we are taking, we should be able to be minding cost savings to the organization. Now, technology is the infrastructure and enhanced by COVID. How are we leveraging technology to make sure that operational efficiency and I mean, this is being by technology. In the past, it would have been a face-to-face thing, but today, how many of It also means that we should be prompt delivering customer service, and of course, the in-thing. But you know that there are different performance levels. One is at the corporate level. What I mean is what you departmental level, the business unit level, individual level. What it means is that you in the organization should be questions that you are not just looking to take home salary, but you value and also protecting value in the what do we hello, somebody is echoing, please. All right. Now, meeting these stakeholders' expectations come with challenges. The common challenges include regulations, NAFDAC, Financial Reporting Council, SEC, CBN, asking how come CBN is here, you know, risk-based forex, and the pharmaceutical sector of importation, raw materials, finished products, and some human resources. And you do them using currencies, okay? So CBN regulation on foreign is also a key important and to be a challenge to the health. Now, funding, which Abimbola has talked about, bringing in funds outside the country and competency is another big challenge, okay, in the industry. Pharmacists in the Nigeria, medical doctors agree with me that whenever you are your organization, it becomes a very big challenge. You could see robust CV. You find out that the most of the people you are interviewing for are not just there. This is also a challenge. How about data quality? You have customer information in your database. How accurate can those of us in the, or even in the banks, for example, even you find out that of the time when you call up your customer data or even financial data is a very big challenge. Organization is a big issue too. Technology, how much to implement those technology and the ability to electricity is a very big challenge. Even when you have technology, with making sure that you have good power system to be able to move on. About it. Competition is a very big issue in the industry. Now, I can say for medicine, part of the world, that's a very big challenge for the pharmaceutical sector in Nigeria. Importation also is a very big fake product in the industry. A lot of companies are with creative methodologies, how to sell products on the things they need to do to make sure that the infectious diseases and its variant has shown that, look, of the top risks and challenges in the agenda for every sector. 2020 was a very challenging year, even this 2020 with the COVID variants coming up. You know what is happening in Europe and US now, but we're talking in Nigeria. I mean, we And reason why we're a little bit luckier, I don't know. Okay, so but at least we don't have as much as we have in other countries. But it's a very big challenge. So these challenges, can anything be done to make sure that the organizations we are working for, corporate governance, to upscale the performance? One of the big founding pillars to ensure that we meet the organizational targets, also meet the stakeholders' expectations, is good internal control system. So what do we mean by an internal control? There are various definitions of internal control. If you do Google internal control, you have different definitions. What is define control as business policy or procedure that is established within an organization to create value or minimize risk. Wikipedia has its own definition. Course.com has its own definition. Investopedia has its own definition. COSO framework has its own definition. Theme of all these definitions. The common theme is that for an organization to meet its value proposition, that is its mission, its goals and objectives, and its strategies, and also the stakeholders' expectation, there must be structure in terms of reporting. You have your CEO, which is at the executive level. You have your board of directors, which is at the governance level. You have your managers and GMs. These are the middle level or senior management level. The reporting structure and roles and responsibilities must be defined. Not just with heads, okay? And you also need to motivate to remuneration to make sure they are working, achieving the corporate objective. You have to make sure that there are processes, policies to drive the organizational demands, and of course, technology, use of technology, and also strategy. All these 5 elements make up what you call internal control system, okay? So,
excuse me, Ms. Sally, you have 2 minutes more, ma.
Yes. So what models can we use to establish internal controls? The COSO framework is a typical model to establish internal control. And what does COSO framework say? COSO framework say that the role, the tone at the top must be very, very, to be able to identify the risks that's affecting the organization in terms of the opportunities and also the threats, and also the risk sizes, and also assign roles and responsibilities to monitor those risks, and also controls to make sure that those risks are mitigated, all right? I've talked about the COSO control framework. But what is the meaning of all this? Of all this to us is that there is what we call 3 lines of defense. At the operational level, the people, these are called the first line. People are the second line of defense and internal audit to make sure that been established a line of defense, which is your internal audits and also regulators who make sure that they bring in independent assessment, independent viewpoint to make sure that the policies and procedures that have been established in the organizations are actually working as expected. What are the critical factors so to make sure that all these things relating to internal controls are working well. What is to be done, knowing and knowing where it is to be done, and know how it is to be done, and also why it should be done. You are certainly going to have an effective internal control system that will ensure that good corporate governance system works. All right.
Thank you very
That's
much,
all
ma'am.
about my papers. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Very much. Please, if you have any questions for Abimbola or Sally, so that we can Claudine. Okay.
So there's a lot to take in. We will certainly share these documents with you so that you can reflect. You can, Ms. Sally or myself, and when Rob also comes on, he would also share his own perspective on corporate governance and how it's relevant to the health sector.
Okay. Thank you, Abimbola. While we're waiting for questions in the chat room, so there's a question here that says, can a small practice
Got it.
Yes. A small community pharmacy can practice corporate, okay, from the perspective that company must be registered, and for any organization to be registered, you must have directors, okay?
Yes.
And again, you will have a CEO, okay? And you also have these that are also supporting in running the pharmacy. So from the perspective that, look, there must be good business conduct, good business practices. Don't sell fake. Don't charge exorbitantly to your customers when you know that medicine affordable. So when everybody in the organization knows that, look, you don't need to sell fake medicine or expired medicine for customers, that's good. Okay.
Yeah.
On that, if you from structural perspective. All right.
Thank you. So the practice of good corporate governance is not overnight. It starts, and I always advocate, start it gradually, start building a system of accountability, start from where you are at. Sometimes you are accountable to even yourself, where you know the inventory that you make, the losses you are making, and the debts that you're carrying. Just even knowing that for yourself is important. But also having in place advisors is a good practice. And I always tell small companies to start with advice, 3 people. One, I mean, as much as possible, make sure they're independent. They have nothing to gain. Decisions on your behalf, but they're there to be, and having that advisory board in place and formalizing it. They're not just friends you chat with or send what call from time to time. They're actually people that I want to be accountable to you. I want to meet with you, and if possible, you can meet with me and my staff in our pharmacy. So I started Advantage Health Africa. With that, I had 3 advisors, and then they grew to 5. It was later when we then transited to a bigger, more formal structure that we now have a board of directors. So that's you committing to good corporate governance. The other is your transparency and your disclosure and your reporting. Many times we forget that, look, beyond the tax man, you need to have reports in place, because one, you don't know who is going to want to be a strategic partner or want to be a strategic partner. So having your books ready for a bank to look at, for any finance person to look at. It's a great practice. Many of our small pharmacies are currently depending on just inflows and outflows through wholesalers with no reporting. You see, that does a disservice to you. I told someone recently that, look, the practice of just buying on credit from your wholesaler and there's no proper account in place does not give any bank the confidence level that they need. What they want to see is money flowing into your account and flowing out, flowing in and flowing out. Even if it's 5 naira every day, they want to see it. That way they can have a paper trail of your health and they can give you support to match where you are. Too many of us are doing the business outside of that formal reporting structure, and therefore we're hindering our own growth unknowingly. I know it's really, bothersome. Sometimes, what's all this? It's just my business. But really, if you want to grow and you want to establish something that outlives you or outlasts or sustainable as much as possible, please embrace the practice little by little, little by little. After a while, it will become the norm with you. It will become, a style with you, and then you can have, better processes in place.
Okay, thank you, Abimbola. So there's another question here which says, in a company, I think Abimbola will answer this. In a company which has just launched and has no revenue yet, how do you get advisors and C-suite executives when you cannot pay them yet?
Advisors came from my network. I always tell people that I started my business without actual cash capital. I started with social capital. So I can speak to my own experience. For example, my former boss, where I used to work, became an advisor because we had forged a good relationship. Even up until now, if I need a referee in anything I'm applying for, he's the person that I go to. So incidentally, I had two former bosses that became advisors on my board, me and Bumi. The other one was someone that I admire the way his mind thinks. He's so cerebral and can think far and wide across sectors, and he's working in a consulting firm. And I thought I could benefit from it. So even when I was starting doing anything, he was on hand to hear me out, would fix lunch. His name is Shagun, would fix lunch, would go, he was very busy, he was always traveling in and out of Lagos. But anytime I knew he was around, I would make sure that I call him. So at a point in time when I said, oh, I want to advise us, he wasn't hesitant to join. I also had an associate, someone that had, related with a bit from afar, but when I began to speak to him about my business, we had lived in the same estate. When I began to speak to him about my business and, from his background, he's an accountant, he had come out, he had done a science course, he had worked in PwC, he had that breadth. So Paul became an advisor and that was helpful. But I also wanted someone with legal background because sometimes you enter into agreements and you really don't know what you're into. So for me, the composition matters depending on the type of business you're doing. So maybe someone that will advise you on legal issues, someone that would advise you on finance, risk, and governance issues, someone that would advise you on general business growth. Because sometimes you think you're doing right, and the person say, come on, hold on. Have you thought in this perspective? So that helped me just to have the breadth. But I'm not saying that that's the only way to go about it. You can look at the composition. You can look at your own weaknesses, for example, and say, I don't pay attention to X, Y, Z. I need someone around me that typically pays attention to this, that I can call on and will not feel threatened or will not threaten my business or me. And then the last thing I would like to say about advisors is that there must be people that you can listen to. Too many times you just hang out with friends. Your friends might not be able to give you objective advice, meaning they may be hesitant about hurting your feelings. I mean, I know at a point in time that one of my advisors said, look, Abimbola, you have a great team. You have a fantastic team, but you don't have anybody in the middle that can caution you or check you. Your team seems to be far from you in age and bringing people in the middle. I mean, I could have felt hurt. I could have thought, oh, with all the work my people are doing, jumping up and down, working 7 days a week and 24/7, how they not good enough? But on reflection, he was really correct. because sometimes even though we said, oh, we're on a first name basis, everybody calls themselves by name here and all that, there's some corrections that your team cannot give you if they don't have that gravitas that they have gained from working in other places and have come into middle management or senior management alongside you. And I really cherish the fact that that advice came from an advisor, because by the time we're setting up our board of directors and setting up a better structure, it was imperative, in fact, very early to hire senior management people that had, better experience. And that is one of the benefits of having a.
Okay, thank you, Abimbola. So there's another question that says, I think this is also like the small community pharmacy question. The person says, how large should a startup for lab testing be to have corporate governance?
Lab testing. You see, your business can be, so long as you started the business, you must start with the right systems in place. I particularly love Sally's presentation. You see, take all the elements that she talks about. So take these slides from her, take each of the elements and say, how can I do my own starting from where I am? Don't wait until you're large. I know that there are some informal businesses that have grown large. They are dealing in hundreds of thousands of naira, millions, in fact. They are run by one man and everything is in his hand. But you and I would agree that all across Africa, we can't count the number of dynasties that we have. We also cannot count the number of companies that have outlived their founders more than 2 generations. There's no business today that was started by Abiola that I know of that is still thriving. There's no business today that was started by many people that we heard of then that are still thriving. It's because they probably missed that window to start early at the point in time that they couldn't listen to the advice of putting in place the right systems. But those systems must start with you. I am struggling sometimes with reporting systems and all. I wish I had started much earlier so that anytime anybody asks for 3 years account, 4 years account, it's all ready. Do but you don't do. I always urge, get someone external to support you. If you have to pay the person, pay the person. The person is patient. Some people they love numbers. But you don't love it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You cannot put your head, under in the sand. I know to do, but I'm not doing. That's all coming through. But I hope that was useful. I start as early as possible. Even when you are registering the company, start putting in place a system for accounting. Start putting in place some transparency system. Start doing monthly. Okay, we had 90 patients. We were able to treat 18. 72. Just start putting in place some record and reporting, as though you are going to present that monitoring report to USAID. Just assume. So assume that, then put yourself under that process. Guess what? Last year, I introduced a wholesaler to a company that wanted to invest. The wholesaler is already doing about $500 million per year. That's their turnover. So I really put in place everything. Investor wanted to invest just 50 million, but they wanted to put money in, and they had a discussion. Guess what? They didn't invest. I sit on the board of that investor, so I read the report that they put out for later. They said there was no visible support structure in place. This is a man that has been running his business night and day, and of course needed support in finance. And he missed that opportunity. There was no other person but him. He should have an accident or on. So they didn't see around him a support structure. That's how that 50 million worked elsewhere. So I'm talking about something tangible and painful that I am experiencing and I'm seeing my people are experiencing. I'm saying we must start from the beginning. Don't wait till your business is so complex that it's now too late for you to put that in place.
Okay, thank you, Abimbola. So Miss Sally wants to put some word in about how to get advisors from the person who was asking. So Miss Sally, please. Thank you. Is she here?
Hello, Sally. I don't think she heard you.
Okay. Hello, Miss Sally. I'm not sure she's still on the call. Maybe when she comes, I think she's on the call. I can see her here. She said she wanted to give some more advice on how to get advisors. So, because there's another question here, but I wanted her to give that, answer that question first before I share the last question. I can't.
Sally, we can't hear you.
Maybe she's not mute. She's not mute. Okay. Okay. Maybe Abimbola will take this question as well so that she said she's talking. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, she sent me a message that she's talking, so I said we can't hear her. Okay, so the last, well, not the last, there's a question here. It says that, can you share some helpful resources on how to design a company policy?
Okay, maybe Sally can take this because there are so many types of policies that you want to design. So I say, start from templates you can download, start from friends that have some policies. But I think Sally just showed up on the screen, and
Yeah, I saw her.
you can take that.
I think her audio is bad somewhere because I can see her lips
Something
moving.
happened to your audio. We can't hear you, Sally. Maybe you can sign out and join again.
And come back in.
Yeah. All right, but I will share my own experience with designing policies. So I've always had a for organizations that have policies. So whenever I find a policy, I copy it, I save it. So first of all, you can ask someone like me, oh, do you have a sample policy on XYZ? Maybe on anything. There are samples. But also there are samples on Google. You'll be amazed at the free templates that you can find. When I want maybe a presentation on how to walk 10 kilometers every day, just type it in, how to walk 10 kilometers every day, .pdf or .ppt, that's .powerpoint, something will come out. Is either walking kilometers will come out and someone has written it and start from something. It doesn't always start from scratch. And then you modify it to fit your own sector or fit your own business and your own realities or your own context. So that's a beautiful way to start. Another is to be a part of an organization like an association. Many times those associations have published certain guidelines. You can start with their guidelines and then begin to build up on it to use. It might not even be an association that is in your country, in Nigeria. It might be an association on a global level that they have certain guidelines that are on their website. So go on their website and download some of those, and that helps you. But if you want to start organically, find any, you want to start organically, then do a brainstorming session with your team. And if possible, invite someone external to you to come and join that brainstorming session. And you can take all of the aspects you want. What is the definition of this policy? Who are the stakeholders that will be affected by the policy? When will it come and take effect? What areas will it cover? Does it have a regulation that it will be tied to? When last will it was it reviewed? When will this policy be reviewed? How often will we refer to it? And then you start from there. So first of all, identify all the subtitles and then start addressing who, and then you list all the who, when, and all. So Sally has given a good guideline in the presentation she made on who, what, when, why, how, and all. So use that to begin to ask your team during the elect, and you may be able to come up with it, give it to someone to help you to review. And so there are different ways to do that. But I can assure you there are many policies and guidelines in place already. It may not be here, but search for it in South Africa, search in Kenya, search in the UK, search in other Anglophone countries like Ghana, there are policies around corporate governance that you can start, or any other aspect of your business that you can start with.
Okay, thank you, Abimbola. Sally isn't back on the call yet. Yes, there's another question. She isn't back on the call yet, so I will just take the next question. This question says, how to thrive outside the city in a semi-urban environment where enlightenment is not at its peak. I don't know if the person is a pharmacist, a medical doctor, or anything, but the person just says how to thrive outside of the city.
So for me, if enlightenment of the people that surround you is key to your business, then you have to make it happen. You have to make it happen. And what do you mean by enlightenment? Is it awareness of your services? Then find creative ways that it will happen. I use an example that many people, I refer to an example many people use. Some people would hold community services, come, test your blood pressure, check your blood sugar, and so on. It's an avenue to attract them. But you can also say that, how do they right now gather? They may gather at the village square or at meetings on a regular basis, maybe every last day or every last market day or every market day. Be there, be present where they gather, and make your presence known. You might even give out gifts to influencers in the neighborhood. My master's, my MBA was on how to market in non-profit, how to do marketing in non-profit organizations. So I had how to sell condoms. I know some people are excited, but how to market condoms. And that was the first time I began to learn about influencers, and I began to learn about marketing values and marketing norms. You must be. There are people they listen to right now, peers, who are leaders amongst peers. Think with them. There are those who are keen on healthcare, that your research that is called snowballing. Meaning you go to one person, the person then says, oh, go and see my friend, and you start snowballing an idea drive within even a village. They are human beings. So your fundamental assumption is that, however, it's not the same. Therefore, you start appreciating their own systems and then working with the systems that they have. If there are people that are hesitant to give you information or such, find out what they are open to and start with that, and then you can grow it from the question. Without further context, I think that's the best I can do right now. But if there's anybody else who is learning or practice in one way, you please put your comments out as well, so we can all learn.
Okay, thank you, Abimbola. So I think Sally's back on the call. I just admitted her in now. So I'm hoping that she can give us the insight she wanted to call on the last facilitator. Hi, okay, welcome back.
Hi,
Thank
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can
Okay.
hear.
Okay. All right. I wanted to yes, where can you, whereas apart from their networking group, your WhatsApp group, from the Facebook friends and colleagues, okay, where else can you get credible advisors? If you check the Institute of Directors website, Institute of Directors is an organization that 20,000 different directors from different organizations in Nigeria, which I'm also a member. In this organization, that's IOD, you have a lot of experienced executive directors and non-executive directors that are actually looking for opportunities to start up companies or young companies or companies that are not big. So to network with such organization to get free resources. Again, there is also a big women organization called WIMBIZ. You have lots of high women directors, women senior executives that are also looking for companies and small companies. So apart from your WhatsApp group and also those professional organizations where you can get these resources free of charge. So I urge you that you should opportunity to become a Nigeria. Membership is not expensive. I think it's less than 30,000 naira. IOD is Institute of Directors is actually quite expensive. Okay, but there is an arm of IOD that is free of charge for you to join, and that's Institute of Directors Corporate Governance Networking. So I will share the link and also the contact with Abimbola so that it can be included on the materials to be given to you. You can actually get quite a lot of free resources from there.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay.
You're muted, Oyinda.
Sorry about that. So we have our last speaker here on the call, and I'll be introducing him in a few minutes. Welcome, Rob. Thank you for joining the call.
It's a pleasure.
Can you make him a co-host?
Yes, he is. He's a co-host already. Okay, so thank you. Thank you for joining. So we have our last speaker for the corporate governance webinar on the call now. And I'll just be introducing him so that he can take his session and take the remaining questions. Partner Emeritus, PwC South Africa, Group Managing Director, Platinum Edge Consulting Limited. He has taken on various professional roles, including Head of Internal Audit at ESCOM, Southern African Lead Partner Corporate Governance at KPMG, General Manager Group Internal Audit at MTN, Senior Executive Partner Business Risk Service Ernst & Young, and Chief Risk Officer South African Airways, as well as serving as a lecturer in a university. Rob is a foremost thought leader behind the development of approaches for combined assurance and has presented several papers on this topic globally. Thank you, Rob, for choosing to do this for us. Welcome, and you can take your session now.
Okay. Thank you, Abimbola, and good afternoon, all. It's very good to sort of feel as I'm almost back home in Nigeria, but even though I'm far away,
You're
I
welcome,
waved,
Rob.
thank you. I waved to you all when I was flying to Sierra Leone about 2 weeks ago. So I have been close in these times. Right, I'm going to be talking. I was going to try and get my screen all right so that you can see what I'm talking about. Right, can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. Right, I've entitled this, Does Corporate Governance Matter in the Health Sector in Nigeria? Now, as Abimbola did say to you, I am knowledgeable of what's happening in in Nigeria and the health sector, having been there and consulted in that sector as well. So hopefully, what I'll be showing will resonate. Okay, so I want to just touch some of these areas. The importance of governance. What is it that makes governance important, just as a general matter? So there's 3 questions I want to ask. What does corporate governance mean? What do investors really want? And why does corporate governance matter? So those are the key areas. And I think you'll find there's different definitions of corporate governance. There's different definitions of what are why it should matter. And I think the biggest thing that I'm looking at, and that's why I'm leaving it for last, is it's all to do really with confidence of people investing money, whether it's your own money, whether you're trying to sell to somebody else, whether you want a partnership with somebody else, whether you want funding from the bank, whether you are looking to expand into other territories. You've got to look at who's going to give you the money. If you are so rich, there's lots of rich people in Nigeria who probably don't care if they lose a couple of $100 million. They don't care, but I'm not sure that I'm talking to this group or that group here. But clearly people are cautious with their money. And I think that's where corporate governance plays a big role. So what about corporate governance? Without necessarily going into all the elements, but simple terms, seeks to enhance the basic requirements of the law. Now, this one I quite like because you might have, I don't know if you've covered in the previous sessions, that you've now got the financial reporting code that is now a gazetted code in Nigeria on corporate governance. I'm sure in the previous sessions you heard about that. Now, if I look at the situation, particularly for directors, and I'm not sure of how many of you are actual directors of your company versus sort of owners, but one of the areas of concern is liability of directors where a company has seemed to be doing something wrong. Now, a company is not a Sorry, I was muted, so hopefully I'm back on track. I see a nod.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. So it seeks to enhance the basic requirement law by giving you, as directors, an ability to defend yourself from liability. Without going into the whole requirements of directors and fiduciary duties and where outsiders can sue you, it is a massive area of liability exposure for directors, is the whole way in which you run your company. So if somebody was to say to you, how did you comply with the requirements of due care and skill and fiduciary duties? You can say, I complied with the FRC guidance given. That's it. that's an excellent defense, because there it is. That's what you did. You followed best practice, and therefore you've got a really good defense. One thing which is I'm less happy about the FRC is that they have made it a regulatory instrument, because corporate governance normally was not conceived to be regulatory. It was trying to more win the hearts and minds battle to do things properly, as opposed to forcing you to do something regulatory. But being gazetted in Nigeria, it is now a regulatory requirement. So it is something that needs to be considered, despite it that it shouldn't be so. So it's also to provide best practice, to discharge legal obligations in terms of what the board should do, how the board is doing good work, reporting and disclosures. A lot of reporting and disclosures has made corporate governance and accounting work, because everything seems to land up in the annual report or in the annual financial statements. So that's where accountants tend to find themselves dealing with corporate governance. But, and I like the last bullet here, it's about making good decisions by the person who's supposed to make the decisions. So it's really helping you, whenever corporate governance setup you've got, to make sure that you're making the right decision and you're authorized to do so. Now, I know there could be a lot of owner managers here. Well, sometimes it's not about that you've got the power to make the decision. It's about making sure you've done enough diligence in making that decision. So it's not taking away your power. It's actually making sure that you've considered the matters that should be considered before you make that decision. It's one of the points that I quite like to talk about in terms of control or governance also. Did you know that brakes on motor cars were introduced not to make the car stop, but to make the car go faster? Without brakes, you couldn't take the corners. You couldn't go fast, because you'd have to, I don't know, put your foot out and try and make the car stop. So brakes are about making you go faster, and corporate governance, it should be about good decisions to grow your wealth and to grow your businesses. So let's have a look at this issue around investors. What do investors want? Now, let's have a look at this one as a possibility. There's a question: what's wrong with this picture, and would you invest in it? Now, this is not so long ago. The board of directors had an average age of 68. 2 board members are over 80. Average age 68. So that's, I suppose I should say, I'm not even 68 yet, so I wouldn't be a director, because I'm below the average. Only 1 woman. That presumably would send shockwaves to you all, but I'm not hearing anybody. 2 bankers. Oh, and by the way, it happens to be a bank, and there's only 2 bankers who are actually on the board. Then I think there's a couple of red herrings. I said 1 director is a theatre producer. 1 director is also on the board of Red Cross, which might be interesting for you from the healthcare sector. There are 3 new members since the turn of the century. Now, given the age of this particular bank, I presume they're not talking about 1900, they were talking about 2000. Others were appointed in 1994, at the time that this company listed. The chair of the board, the chief executive, and the chair of the Risk and Finance Committee are all the same person. And the other 2-person risk committee, there's only 2 people in the risk committee. That's the chair stroke CEO of the company, and he's 80 years old. He's one of those 2 old people there. Right. The question I have for you, based on that brief structure of the board of directors, would you invest in this company, this bank? You can unmute and say yay or nay or whatever.
Nay.
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 Okay. All right, good. Yay, nays? Any yays? Okay. Well,
I'll
I've got a
probably invest.
Sorry, say again.
Yes.
Oh, you would invest in this company. Okay, we've got one person to invest. So let's have a look at what's wrong.
Nay.
Nay. Oh, okay. Better that there's nays. That's the company.
Whoa.
Lehman Brothers.
Lord have mercy.
Hmm.
You should have shown this before.
No. That was what Lehman Brothers was before it was it hit the wall.
Yeah.
I suppose some people have said if it was Lehman Sisters, they would have been fine. Okay. I know that all your laughter is muted because
Yes.
otherwise I'd hear you laughing out aloud. Okay, so what do investors want? They want capital security. They want to get their money back. They want stable returns. You know, they don't want a yo-yo of returns. They want to know that every year we should get at least so much percentage return. They want a good yield on investments. In other words, they're not just looking for a 1% return. They're looking for a 10 to 20% return. Ideally, some inflation protection, and that obviously depends on the underlying asset. They don't like taking too much risk. They like risk diversion. In other words, that you're not concentrating on one industry, you're not concentrating in one line of service. And that's quite difficult if you've now seen what COVID has done to many of the businesses. You know, certainly if you thought, you know, the Ocado riders, I'd imagine, have had very poor results if people haven't been traveling in and around Lagos, wherever else they're operating. So investors also don't like to know they're only investing in one particular asset. And that ties into, they don't like concentrated risk exposures. They don't like that, you know, everything's tied up in one. And one of the things is also the regulatory risk exposure. Now, this is something for the health sector, which is particularly pertinent because there is regulation, and by the nature of what happens with health, it has to be well managed because of the threat to human life. So yes, there will be risk exposure, but on the other hand, you know, if I look at my risk diversification, you might say, well, you're into healthcare. Wow, people can get sick from a number of issues. And actually, a event is horrible to say. It is actually good for the health business because there's a lot more business because obviously you're involved. So your concentration risk as a health service or health sector is well, I wouldn't say it's a concentration risk, but your dependency is on people. And until such time as people do not exist, and I don't think that will ever happen, anyway, that you know, you're well insulated from that perspective, and therefore you would be encouraged, or investors would look at you and say, okay, I can get capital security. People need hospitals. The returns will probably be good, particularly now, and the yield, particularly now with the COVID and that. You're likely to be inflation protected because whatever your increase in your pharmaceuticals and others, you can pass on. The fact that you're dealing with people, you're not really concentrated in only dealing with appendix, you're dealing with anything that can go wrong with people. So you've actually got a very diverse risk spread. You do have regulatory risk exposure. And to some extent, that's good for you because the barrier of entry into your market is not easy. So it's not like you can open up your corner pharmacy and say, come and get your pills cheap here. You do have regulatory exposure, so it's not something that anybody can just take on without having to comply with the law. And then what else they don't like is reliance on government subsidies. Now, clearly, if in the public sector or the public hospitals, yeah, there are public hospitals, that's what it is. But nobody's going to be investing in the public hospitals because the public hospitals are funded 100% by the state. Okay, now I'd be interested just to take you through a very quick area of governance. Now, this particular survey came from McKinsey's, who did this on the International Social Governance Network. Now, this is a network where institutional investors get together, and they then take, from an institutional investor point of view, they then say what's most important. Now, when you say institutional investor, this is at least, they have about, I think it's about $7 trillion of assets under management. It's all your pension funds like CalPERS. It's other people like Hermes and others that are really, really big investment houses. And they said, when you go out looking for an investment, what do you look for? Well, the first thing they said, yes, it's got to make money, fundamental analysis. Then they don't go and look at the next thing. They go and say, okay, well, what's happening with the management quality? What's happening with corporate governance quality? What's happening with the way in which this company interacts socially into the environment? And those are all sitting at the main focus of corporate governance. So to the extent that you are managing well there, that's going to result in good ratings by investors. So they then took this a bit further. So, they care. So here we've got our investment group would never approve an investment in a company. Oops, I don't know. People are coming in and blocking the screen. The investment group would never involve a company with bad governance. They don't want to do it. CalPERS is one of the organizations that actually looks for badly governed companies, takes them over and turns them around. So they like that. And there were some others here of a private bank. They're not even interested in putting any money because the company got poor governance. So percentage of investors with multiple responses. Would you avoid certain companies with bad governance? Yes. Would you decrease your holdings? Yes. Would you avoid certain countries? And this one is interesting, that they weren't necessarily going to avoid the countries. So they wouldn't necessarily say Nigeria is not a good country to invest in, that they're less worried about the country risk than the actual corporate risk, which I found was an interesting observation from the survey. I'm going to go quickly through this one without you having to read too much, but they did a comparison for the survey. They said company A has poor governance and company B has good governance. And those are the factors. So you'll get these slides anyway. These are the factors. They said, this is A and B. How much would you be prepared to pay as a premium for the company B, which is good, and versus that of company A, which is poor? And the results came back segregated by country. In other words, the investors, they said, put this per country, how much? So in Morocco, they would pay a premium of 41% for a well-governed company. And then down to Canada and the UK was only down to 12 and 11. So I'm not necessarily encouraging you all to go to Canada because there's lots of Nigerians in Canada, but so you'll feel very welcome. But I think if I look at that change in premium, is because the UK and Canada and Sweden and others have had good governance for a long time. So that premium is sort of saying, well, whoever's bad is already out of the system. Whereas Morocco, they're saying, it's still a long way to go. You'll see somewhere in the middle here, and if you can see my pointer, South Africa is at 22% premium that they would pay. For some reason, they didn't include Nigeria, which is obviously unfortunate for us, but that's what it is. But the bottom line you're seeing here, they're going to pay a lot of additional money for a well-governed company. So why does corporate governance matter? And it's actually good for us all. It's not something that's only big corporates that are listed on the stock exchange or on the premium stock exchange. I think you've got that in Nigeria, where companies that would like to be seen as good corporate governance practitioners or employing those practices are listed on a priority board. And that hopefully would give them some sort of a premium on their shares in terms of liquidity, etc. So let's have a look at why it matters, corporate governance, just as an overall point of view. First of all, it creates financial stability. I'm going to go down, and the development of capital markets is important because that creates the financial stability. So you get your financial sector development, which becomes strong. You get private sector growth.
Hello, Rob. We can't hear you anymore. Okay. Thank
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. You have 5 minutes more, please.
Okay, so I'm being chased.
No, thank you.
The financial services, the financial sector, the banks are actually pretty well governed in Nigeria. You've had your spate of disasters, the most recent being Sky Bank and Diamond Bank. So you're not immune to fallouts of governance in the financial sector, but generally I've seen banks in Nigeria take this governance exceptionally seriously, and CBN chases them all the time. Now, the problem that we get is this improved access to credit in Nigeria, because the credit risks are very high. So the banks don't lend to customers to build. They would rather invest in treasury bonds that gives them a stable return and they take no risk. CBN comes along every so often and says, no, you've got too much invested in that, you're too liquid. We're now going to force you to take some CBN bonds, which provide 0% interest. And the banks will prefer to take 0% than to take losses on credit. And without credit, you can't build. That's a problem in Africa. If you don't have an ability to buy your own home on a mortgage bond, you're never going to get better. Whereas a mortgage bond, over time you get paid better. There's inflation, etc., and pretty soon you've built your house. And you built your house. Well, now you've got people who got to supply you materials, and they've got to employ people to help you build your house, and so you get economic growth. So your problem is that your banks don't want to lend enough because the credit risk is too high, and they'd rather get no income than lend it to people to grow. So this is what I really liked. Simple logic. No transparency, no trust. No trust, no credit. No credit, no investment. No investment, no growth. That's what corporate governance gives. Now, my last 2 minutes, I just want to just have a look at a little bit of corporate governance in Nigeria and a couple of issues around how it works in other organizations. What do we face? We have a leadership problem. Inappropriate tone at the top. If I look at some of the banks that I used to go to, their Christmas hampers used to be televisions and golf clubs and all sorts. It wasn't just a box of chocolates. So any staff member coming through might say, wow, why are you accepting such lavish gifts? So immediately it gives a problem from the tone at the top. Conflict of interest is a big one. And I'm not saying it's bad. Sometimes you just don't know it, particularly if you are owner-managed business. what's yours and what belongs to your company or your pharmacy or your hospital, you see it as all of your own. It's not. It's separate to you. Your business should be separate to you, the individual. That's where you sort out the conflict of interest. If you now start raiding from your business to keep yourself and your lifestyle afloat, your business will fail. Unethical practices. Well, there's plenty of those going around. That's fraud and corruption. Yeah, that's not going to help. Board don't spend enough time, in this case, on a bank's matters or your own matter. They spend a lot of time talking about the economy and other things without looking at what's happening in the organization. There has been not as good induction training, and that's where the likes of the Institute of Directors and the Society for Corporate Governance provides affordable training for directors. Lack of transparency and disclosures. I think that's a big one. And that's where the Financial Reporting Council comes to. They're actually trying to force better disclosure even in private sector companies. The lack of succession planning is another big thing. I did a work for basically a one-person owned oil company. And the one risk we were not allowed to talk about was succession. So are you wishing the owner to die? You're not allowed to talk about it because that was the biggest problem. What happens when you go? And he was already 80. I don't know if he's still alive. You're not looking at if the directors are performing. You don't have a basis for blowing the whistle on when somebody sees something awful. And you're not getting information that's enabling boardroom discussions to be constructive. Now, obviously, when you get to your own businesses or smaller businesses, you tend to find that if you owner managed or your management and directors are very close, they will have that information. But I would say you should be looking to have some independence on your board. Let them have a look at what's happening. And just of interest, all the accounting firms that I was with, they only had members of the partnership who were director equivalents. Nobody else. And now, particularly after the audit failures, they are now bringing in lots of independent directors to say, actually, you know, we're serving the self-purpose. We need to actually get some perspective of what it is we're doing. And I would encourage you to do the same. I'm not going to go through those requirements because you'll get them in the handouts. I just want to look at the core elements of governance. And this is where I think it's worth, and it's worth looking at. First of all, what is an investor looking for? Now, let's just take it in simple terms: share price and how the company performs. So investor confidence is looking at the quality of your leadership. Who's in charge? The balance of power, how is he checked? How do you protect investor interest that you don't go all over the place and squander the money? How do you talk to everybody? So you are, by perception, who you are. And then the bottom line performance, do you have a good strategy? Your performance and risk management is right, good ethics, and do you comply with the law? So these matters aren't very big in terms of, you know, it can apply to anybody. It's not a bank. It's not a multinational. It's everybody. And if you look at some of the issues here, you'll find that on the stock exchange, for example, I did an analysis on the banks in Nigeria. So the banking sector showed that capitalization was at least 60% less than the aggregated bottom line performance of those banks. So the confidence in the Nigerian banks when I did that survey was absolutely rock bottom. Normally it's a premium. It says, okay, if we now look at our earnings versus market capitalization, we actually usually substantially higher on market capitalization than the net asset value of the company. So it's actually interesting that. So it's almost saying we don't believe in the banking leadership. We don't think they're looking after people. They're all in their self-interests, and they're not talking to us enough. Anyway, just a quick item here. We've taken a trading company, a bank, and a utility company, and rated these through sort of a rating mechanism. Now, you might all look at this and say, that trading company doesn't look very good. It's only at 49, but actually it's pretty good. You know, if I look at that, I think I would expect, if anything, the leadership to be stronger, because you don't have all the necessities of perhaps an independent board and the governance matters, which I'm sure you heard of earlier. You need a strong leader, the person who's actually making this company do what it's supposed to do. Balance of power, you're not going to get it. If it's an owner-managed business, as much as you might like it, the owner's the boss. He's the big ogre, and that's it. Sorry. But understand that that's what it is. So don't expect it. And so your score, what doesn't necessarily have to be out of 100. It's not necessarily a bad score. It's what it is. I would recommend you have some independence there, and that's fine. Your protection of stakeholder interests is doesn't necessarily have to be that high, because you don't have many stakeholders who've got bonds and other shareholders in the way in which they are structured, you know, having sort of voting shares or no voting shares. You probably don't have to produce accounts that get publicly assessed, but you do have to tell the bank manager. So yes, your strategic conversation is at a minimum, which is fine. Where I think you could be a lot better is if you have a winning strategy. If you only had 50% as a trading company, wow, that's not good. You should have a lot stronger. What it is that we do money or make money for ourselves. You should have enough processes in place to make sure that your risk and performance management is right. You want the people who are working for you to be working for you in a good way, so that it's improving your score. The tone at the top, unfortunately, in this case is a bit bad. And the reason being bad is because you've got an owner-managed business, and he just takes whatever he likes. And surprisingly, you have complied with the law in this case as a trading company. Now, some of you might say, well, it's a commercial bank, that's all right. No, for a commercial bank, that's a horrible score. You should be in the late 80s to 90% as a commercial bank. And why? You have the fiduciary duties to all your depositors, not only your investors, to make sure that you are good. So 73 is an awful score for a bank. You should be way in the 88, 96% range, because of the amount of fiduciary responsibility that you have. So I think that's a, you know, so don't just judge a book by its score. That score for a commercial bank is bad. And now this utility company that I've got here, 34 is an absolute awful score, and it's still going down, and it's still awful in all manners. It's really, really bad. And there's nothing that they can do other than implode the whole company and start again. So yes, but being a utility company is propped up by the government. And I think that's the end, yes. Sorry, I just went a little bit over your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Rob, for the presentation. We're supposed to go into question and answer now. And we're supposed to close that. We're actually supposed to end at 3. So please, we crave your indulgence for a few more minutes so that Rob can take questions and give answers to them, and then we'll be done and we'll be out of here. So Rob, I have this question for you. The first question for you says that, what is the cost of corporate governance as it relates to a community pharmacy in a semi-urban environment where there's next to nothing as far as organized systems are concerned?
Okay, I'm going to say there's no cost, because corporate governance is more about behavior than cost. So the owner of that pharmacy would need to make sure that he or she is not, has got their own checks and balances, are not just saying, oh, we've got some money, we better spend it all, because you need some of that money for tomorrow. Otherwise, you won't have the drugs to dispense. You need somebody who's got a clear vision of what it is this pharmacy is going to do, and why it's got a role to play in society, and how it can respond to the changing needs. That's good governance. That's a strategy they're having. Of course, you've got to comply with the laws. Well, that's no different than if you didn't have good governance, because that's where you get inspectors coming along and confiscating all your goods because you haven't done something. And you know well in Nigeria, they love to do that. So I don't think it's going to cost you anything. It's an attitude. It's a state of mind that if you take that in as good corporate governance, you'll be seen as ethical. You'll be seen as somebody who's empathetic to your customers, and that will add value in terms of improved footprints through the pharmacy, as well as minimal regulatory type involvement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the explanation. And another person says, please explain the strategic conversion on your last slide. Part of the factors on the last slide.
Yes. Okay. Strategic conversation is how you talk to your people. So I can use a pharmacy and perhaps use a hospital. In the pharmacy is, what do they know about you? Do they know that you're a good company? Do you perhaps make an effort to be engaged with the community? Because that's part of your conversation. Do you make an effort to tell people what your strategies are so they can institutionalize them, or not say institutionalize them, but they can internalize them so that they can actually work with that? So based on that, I would say it's how you would be perceived. How do you want to be perceived, and are you being perceived like that by all your stakeholders? Now, in the more corporate environment, it's what does your annual report look like? What does your auditor's report look like? But if you're now looking at owner-managed business, it's about how you present yourself to the community that you are relying on for your business.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. I think that's the end. Nobody else has asked any question. I think, Abimbola, do you want to add to this question of cost of corporate governance for community pharmacy?
It just costs you giving attention to it. After a while, you will find that it pays for itself. The fact that you are more accountable will even fetch you cheaper sources of finance than someone that is so risky. If you want to borrow money, you probably borrow it at maybe 18%, and someone else they'll give at 26%. So it pays for itself that you've been keeping records, you've got an external auditor, you've hired someone to look into your books, and it pays for itself. So I think if we think long term, we'll know that this is really advantageous and beneficial to our businesses, whether it's a small business or a larger one. And you would have a better life. You would be freer. You would carry less weight. So if you're looking at the costs, I think you should also look at the benefits and see them side by side. Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you so much, Sally. I wish we could have more time, but 2 hours just runs. 2 hours flies, so this has been a very good turnout. We had at a point about 60 people. For me, this is exploratory. We're starting to have a conversation on good corporate governance. It tells me that the people who are bothered to attend are interested in building legacies and building companies after themselves, or things that they can put a stamp on and say, yes, this was my effort, and I'm happy we've had this turnout.
Sorry,
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Okay,
and,
Abimbola,
well
before
done.
you go, there's a question here that says, how does one determine the right duration for the term of office of board of directors?
Okay, there's something called a board charter. You must write out a board charter, and in it you can then put the terms. Who would even be on the board? Who would be the chairman? How long they would stay? It's typically 3 to 4 years. So you borrow from other practices. So it's typically 4 years. and then you say, oh, it's renewable ones or not, so those are standards that you can then borrow here and there and use to set up your own.
Okay,
Or you
thank you
have
very
better.
much. That's the
All
last
right,
question
thank you.
for today. So thank you everyone for being a part of this webinar today. Like I said earlier, certificates of recognition will be awarded to everyone. It will be sent to your email addresses, and alongside the slides for the 3 presenters and the webinar replay, the Zoom link for the replay. So please expect this before the end of this week. Thank you very much, and we'll continue the conversation offline. We might be reaching out to you. Some of our team members might be reaching out to you for feedback and how you are using what you have learned today to improve your businesses. We hope to have future sessions with you, and we'll be reaching out in subsequent times. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye.